Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. Okay, we are going to close out the book of Genesis today. We're in chapter 50, and Joseph has just died, and this is the scene we're going to pick up on. And in a sense, it's just, again, this is chapter 50 is a closing out not only of the book, but you can also say of the generation. Israel, then the sons of Israel, as they go into the next, you can say, phase of their history. All right, so chapter 50, verse 1 says, now this is, remember, Joseph has just passed away. He given his last words to his sons. Some of them was good, some of them was not so good. They've changed a lot, but there's still Joseph, especially when it came to Simeon, Levi, and Reuben. They were some scoundrels. Okay, anyway, Joseph has now passed away, so this is the scene here. It says, verse 1, then Joseph leaned over his father's face, wept and kissed him. He commanded his servants, who were physicians, to embalm his father. So they embalmed Israel. They took 40 days to complete this, for embalming takes that long, and the Egyptians mourned him 70 days. Now, Joseph is getting a head of state funeral. Okay, so if you were not rich or a leader, you didn't really get this embalming. But the Egyptians' embalming, as we have seen, was quite advanced, so that the bodies that they are found, like in the pharaohs, a lot of these bodies were for thousands of years were in pristine condition. Okay, so but again, that only if you were a leader or rich. So verse 4 says, when the days of mourning was over, Joseph said to Pharaoh's household, if I found favor with you, please tell Pharaoh that my father made me take an oath, saying, I'm about to die, and you must bury me there in the tomb that I made for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go and bury my father, then I will return. So Joseph said, go, bury your father in keeping with your oath. Now remember, Joseph had made Joseph swear, do not leave me in this land. Bury me in the tomb. We also said that tomb Abraham had purchased. Abraham and Sarah was there. Isaac and Rebecca is buried there. And so now Jacob is going to be reunited in death to Leah and not Rachel. Remember, he really loved Rachel. What's interesting about Rachel is that she wasn't the most godly person. She was a very pagan person. But Leah, God seemed to honor Leah in her death, even though she wasn't loved, wasn't wanted. She was despised in her life. But God seemed to honor her in her death. And so Jacob buried her in that tomb. That's kind of interesting. Verse 7, then Joseph went to bury his father, and all of Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his household, and all of the elders of the land of Egypt went with him. Now again, this is sort of a head of state, this nice procession, right? Funeral procession. If you think about we just had General Colin Powell pass away, and you saw that he had a head of state funeral. You know, all of the who's who was there, and you see this nice, again, procession. This is what the Egyptians did. Verse 8, which is kind of interesting because you think about his brothers who are now sort of partaking of this. Verse 8, along with all of Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household, only their children Their sheep and their cattle were left in the land of Goshen. Horses and chariots went up with him. It was a very impressive procession. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, which is across the Jordan, they lamented and wept loudly. And Joseph mourned 7 days for his father. And when the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a solemn mourning on the parts of the Egyptians." Therefore, the place is named Abel Mizraim. It is across the Jordan. Now, keep this in mind that what you see is an Egyptian perception. And also Joseph he's dressed and made up like an Egyptian. So if you saw Joseph outside of the family of Jacob, the brothers and stuff, you would say, yeah, the carts, all of that stuff, they were Egyptian. Verse 12, so Jacob's son did for him what he had commanded. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field near Miriam, which Abram had purchased at the burial site from Ephraim the Hittite. Now, again, apologies as we're going to go through the Old Testament for me butchering these pronunciations. So, all right. Verse 14, after Joseph buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone with him to bury his father. Now, you remember that Joseph had commanded him to not stay in the land, and that was more prophetic on Joseph's part. He wanted to be buried in that land. He also saw himself as a pilgrim passing through, a pilgrimage passing through. All right. All right, so verse 15. Now when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to one another, "If Joseph is holding a grudge against us, he will certainly repay us for all of the suffering we caused him." Now, this is amazing here. And it kind of goes to, as I said, they never ever got over the guilt of the evil they had done to Joseph. And even when they was reunited to Joseph, keep this in mind, they still felt maybe Joseph is the one that's kept them alive. But that was their guilt. I guess the lesson would be, don't do that kind of evil. Or if you do, make it right. I just kind of, they held on to that all of their lives. And now they're kind of like, well, who's to stop Joseph? And notice their attitude. Joseph would be right to do this. Right? Joseph would have every right to exact revenge. But remember what Joseph said? You meant it for good, but God, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good for you. That's amazing. That's amazing. But they still did not come to grips with the goodness of God. All right, so they sent a message to Joseph. Before he died, your father gave a command. Now, we don't know if this is very true or not. They're just trying to save their lives, but we don't know if this is actually true. In other words, we don't know if Joseph actually commanded them to do this. They're just kind of falling on the mercy of Joseph. Verse 17, say this to Joseph, please forgive your brothers' transgression and their sin, the suffering they caused you. Therefore, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your fathers. And Joseph wept when their message came to them. Now, again, this is so kind of amazing here, because one, it shows their remorse. It shows that they have changed. They probably just don't know how to go about earning the forgiveness. And Joseph is now what to them would have been the only kind of savior for them, right? In other words, he's not going to kill us while Joseph is around, although they don't know that. I mean, in other words, if you play out in their mind what they think is true, Joseph would have said, look, I'm going to kill you, and Joseph, you got to deal with it. So, and again, it also kind of shows how they never came to grips of the goodness of God. So, they send this kind of message. Like I said, we don't know if it's true or not. And they're leaning on Jacob, right? Look, Jacob said this. Now, we're not asking for forgiveness because we know we've done wrong. Now that was a good thing. We know we caused you wrong. We know we did you evil. We know we don't deserve to even ask you for forgiveness. We're just asking for Joseph, the father, your father, whom you love. We know you love him. He said, hey, he said, could you forgive them? Right? Now, they didn't have to even do this. Joseph has already given them his perspective. This was a God thing. This was a God thing. And notice Joseph he wept, right? Verse 18. Then his brothers also came to him and bowed down before him and said, we are your slaves. Now remember that dream Joseph had? When all of the sons of Israel would bow to him, and they go, we would never bow to you. In fact, that's why they sold him to Egypt out of spite. They're bowing. Verse 19. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You planned evil against me. God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. Astounding again. Astounding. In other words, you did this for evil, but God did it for your good. That's just stuck. I mean, wow. Wow. Now this is the type of Jesus, the atonement of Jesus, by the way. When we recognize our sinful state, think about this. When we recognize our sinful state and that there is nothing we can do to earn that, right? What could they have done to earn Joseph's forgiveness? Right? 20 years stolen from their father. 13 years hardships. What could they have done? It was Joseph's goodness as it was revealed by God. Now they recognized the fact that there's nothing they could have done to earn it. But that's a type of our salvation, that there is absolutely nothing that we could do to earn our salvation. That salvation is solely on the goodness of God as it is poured out on Christ. That Jesus suffering our evil, our wickedness caused Jesus to die on the cross. Our evil, God took our evil and turned it around in Jesus for our good. That's a type right there. That's a type. And so, if you want to look at that, just especially salvation, and what is amazing about this is most of Christianity reacts the way his brothers have acted. Except they don't even go as far as to ask for the forgiveness. They just think they can earn their salvation. Not knowing you cannot do that. And this is what Joseph has said, that it's already done. Even though they're saying, hey, we're your slaves, we would do, we would do whatever you want, but it's already done. And they didn't have to even be slaves. They didn't have to offer themselves as slaves. The work is already done in Jesus. All right. All right. Verse 20 again, you planned evil against me, but God planned it for good to bring about the present results, the salvation, the survival of many people. Therefore, don't be afraid. I will take care of you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. One of the most, again, if anything, you can say as a type of Jesus' sacrifice, here it is right here. Right here. All right, verse 23, Joseph and his father's household remained in Egypt. Joseph lived 110 years. Now remember, Joseph was 17, around 17 when he went into Egypt. He was 30 when he became ruler. So all this time he's been in Egypt, right? What is that, about 90 something years? My math is off here. If he was about 17, I know my math is off right here, but think about this, 110 years, all the time he's been in Egypt. Verse 23, he saw Ephraim's sons to the third generation. The sons of Manasseh, son Machir, were recognized by Joseph. Now, this kind of is a foreshadowing, we're going to spill over into the book of Exodus. Now, this is interesting because notice we're already into the third generation. And that's a kind of good to set up a timeline. But when Joseph says this, he said to his brothers, I'm about to die. Now, when he says his brothers, meaning those in Egypt. And remember, they got land, they got houses, they're living, right? They're living their best life. I'm just kidding, but they're living in Egypt. So when he says his brothers, this is a statement he's making to, I don't think it's just only the 12, because some of his brothers at this point might have already died. He said, I'm about to die, but God will certainly come to your aid and bring you up from this land to the land he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, why is he saying this? Remember, God had already told them that they're going to go to Egypt, they're going to be in bondage for 400 years, and then they'll be brought out. Verse 25, so Joseph made the sons of Israel take an oath. Remember the same oath that Jacob made Joseph take? Watch this. When God comes to your aid, you are to carry my bones up from this place. This was a statement of faith that even though Joseph had the best life you can think of here, this was never his home, right? You could use the phrase I just used right here, or he was living his best life, but he never saw that. This is not my inheritance right here. Take my bones up out of here. So Joseph died at the age of 110. They embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. So this tremendous blessing, right? The tremendous blessing here that Joseph enjoyed while in Egypt, and it's just amazing. Okay, it's just amazing. All right, guys, this closes out the book of Genesis. The next study will be the beginning of the new generation in the book of Exodus. See you next time.